Good afternoon, people. Hey, Thursday here. Hey, talk about the judgment. We're under massive judgment for justice. So I got to warn again. Apparently, people don't seem to care. The majority of them. So that's sad. So is Florida, California, and New York. So the judgments, like Hurricane Ian, I told you, even though it's spelled Ian, also means I am. God is not fooling around and allowed that hurricane to come in as a major storm warning for South Florida. Now is California, the what they call atmospheric rivers and earthquakes. The water can lubricate the fault line, lubricate it, which means it can slip more. So they're getting hammered. Okay, so then Florida, New York. So New York is number 3 on the list to get massive judgments. And then it doesn't exclude anything in between. It was just back in the day, the Lord showed me that where, New York is supposed to be the big apple, mom's apple pie, everybody come in, the freedom, then eventually go west. And the west was settled, and then Florida was settled last. So, like, all your fashion would come in New York, California, and then Florida. So, like when bell bottoms came out, these New York, California, Florida was the first ones to use them, to buy them, but it took sometimes 2 or 3 years or more for them to become fashionable in the rest of the states. So these three key areas, okay, so then New York, California, Florida, so then spiritually it's backwards because I told you about the counterclockwise New York, California, Florida. Now it's backwards, so it's Florida, California, New York. When it comes to the massive judgment to the horse nation, it's the front leg, the rear of the horse, and then the front of the horse. And this is major judgments that are here. They're ratcheting up in intensity. And all it takes is people to understand what's going on spiritually to stand in the gap, the watchman on the wall to stand in the gap. And I tried for years, for 20 years to talk to the officials in Florida, and they don't want to hear it. They just want what they want. Then, what was it, like 10, 12, 12, 13 years ago? They always want to incorporate everything. So they made 2 more corporations because they thought they needed to incorporate in the physical realm the restoration of the city and area in the West Coast, Florida. So the problem is they're the ones standing in the gap for the enemy because they fear the enemy, respect the enemy. And they moved the revival to Palmetto, Florida, the restoration to Palmetto, Florida. But God actually moved it there because Sarasota is very prideful. Luciferian, then the Bradenton people got very prideful. And then it ended up pushing it to Palmetto. And now it's still fizzling, sizzling because the leadership in Palmetto don't know who they're messing with. They're messing with God himself because God said this, and they want to be the heads. They don't want God to be the heads. They want to be the heads because it makes a lot more money for their businesses. And it's sad. So, and years ago, I asked, how do you take a city for Jesus? You got to understand how Lucifer took it in the first place, through his cronies, through his liars. And then you unravel it from there. And people have been killed over the information because the enemy doesn't want to be taken down, and a lot of people work for the enemy, and they're all taking bribes and whatever. So therefore, your cities, your counties, your states are going down because it's the leadership. Jesus got mad at the leadership, called them a vipers and den of thieves, and he turned over the tables, the money changers, and whipped. So it's judgment time. I mean, which side do you want to be on? Do you want to be stand up and accounted for and doing something for the Lord? or do you want to be get tilled under? So back in the day when the Lord flooded the earth to drown the liars, now he repented of drowning the earth, which means God's not going to do that anymore. He's not going to do that anymore. But there'll be, like in the days of Noah, much flooding, much earthquakes, much famine, much hardship, much. But that's for the enemy's people, because there's 7 years of plenty, 7 years of good. So 7 means spiritual completion. So we're supposed to be entering into the 7 years of plenty, and the two side by side, 7 plenty, seven famined, are going side by side now because everything's coming into a crux, a crucifixion of time, the cross of time, crossroads of times, crossroads communities. So tons of information, detail after detail after detail. But we're not going to mention any names because Jesus don't want to send them to prison. He just wants them to repent. So